out what was wrong with the lens on my camera. It was basically condensation from my breath. I've got to be careful. Yeah, it's cold. Okay. So we dealt with the initial with the actions that can happen during whatever it is, the equivalent to the form, the assembly, or the equivalent to the Senate phase, the assembly phase. Combat. Okay. In here they kind of randomly start claiming things, you know, maybe just getting some things out of the way, but army losses are random. This is the same as Republic of Rome. If you lose, you might lose veteran units or whatever. Percentage losses, consider fleets and armies separately, that's standard. Creating veterans, in some cases, basically, not with fleets, but with other units. You have with the army units, you have a veteran quality unit. I don't believe the fleets do. They do not. Which are going to be counted probably double if, but we'll see. Fleet battle, let's keep going. Commander death. When losing armies and or fleets, you roll 2 dice for each commander. If they roll equal to or less than the number of armies plus fleets lost, the commander dies. A lot easier than drawing a bunch of chits from a cup. With maybe the same kind of representation. And perhaps a little fairer. Fleet and battle losses when fighting a war that includes both sea and a land component. If any armies are lost in the sea battle, the commander can decide not to fight the land combat. For multiple commanders, they vote on whether or not to fight it. Each commander having 1 vote and a majority being required to fight. Any Spartan or allied commander always votes in favor of fighting. If no commanders remain, there is no land battle. Stratagems. When prosecuting a Persian war, anyone can play a stratagem card just before the combat roll. Now, I had an example of one in somebody's hands. Here's one. Take a look at what it says. Play before, roll a die. If it's equal to or less than the commander's military rating, reduces the Persian strength by 240, which... 40 sounds like a lot. I guess there's a reason you need multiple commanders in a single battle. Kind of like you need the horse and buggy in some battles in Republic of Rome. Okay. It's only one of, I assume this means of, the land or sea portion of a war, and only for the current turn. Athens can attempt multiple stratagems on the same war, but not for the same die roll. You roll a die if you get less than or equal to the highest military rating of all the commanders, whoever has the biggest. It fails. Otherwise, roll a die in advance to determine the rating of a statesman whose ability is DR. Oh yeah, some of the military ratings will be randomized, like Pompey. Otherwise, the strength of the war aspect of the printed value is the printed value of 40, whichever is lower. And you wouldn't play it if it's not lower. Resolve wars in any order. The prosecuted wars. Resolve each war completely before proceeding to the next. Roll 3 dice. If you happen to roll their standoff or disaster numbers, in this case the 8 or 13, but there may be more than one for any given war, ignore the next step and apply the corresponding case below. Now, but assuming you don't roll that, you add the dice plus 2 for each veteran army, 1 for each other army or fleet, depending on the type of battle. The highest military rating present, plus only 1 for each other commander. Ooh. Commanders cannot add more in toto than the total strength of the Athenian forces. Wow, 40 sounds hard. I mean, there aren't a lot of hoplites. Minus the strength of the war itself. And you get one of these tables, and if your total ends up low enough, you will be defeated and lose a significant portion of your army. If it gets high enough, you get a victory. But you got to worry about avoiding the standoff and disaster, assuming you have a reasonable chance of winning. If you don't have a reasonable chance of winning, standoff can be kind of good. Okay, at least in Republic of Rome, and I assume here too. You figure out what the results are, and if it's a victory, the war goes in the status box to record the fact. Status box. Not sure. That's up here. I don't know. I don't see anything that's marked status. Not those cards. Don't know. All right. Maybe there's words here. Imminent air status. It's over here. Okay. Now, and certain wars result in creation of leagues. When a war results in a league, you apply the instructions on the corresponding league card and place the league card on the status area of the board. If a league ends, you undo the card's effects and remove it from the board. So there's just going to be a pile, and laws probably go in something like that too. That was always one of the more painful things for me in Republic of Rome, was the laws were just in a pile of like things that were in effect. I never really liked that. Commanders who participated in the war this turn and were not victorious consult the public reaction table. And you'll be making a roll. Modifier disaster stalemate, add the popularity of the leader, and he might be put on trial. One die roll is the reaction to all of them, but they may have different popularities, so they may get different results. Make just one die roll to determine the amount each leader gets from the cash. If they get a payout. When a public reaction is a trial, it occurs only if someone plays an ecclesia card. The first to do so names one of their statesmen as a prosecutor. If no one plays one, there's no trial, and the public reaction halts there. If there's a trial, there's going to be a vote. The prosecutor conducts it. Non-aristocratic followers, votes on theses cards, and talents are the only things that count. And if they're found not guilty, the trial ends and there's no further effects. Otherwise, if they're found guilty, they make a DR, that's 2 dice. This is using the same nomenclature that Avalon Hill used in Republic of Rome, which takes some getting used to, but you're kind of like, why is that capitalized? What's up with that? Others aren't capitalized. In the case of multiple commanders, use the highest oratory and popularity value among the commanders. If death or heavy fines law is not active, a death result is just exile for 3 spaces. And I don't know. I'm assuming the fine is reduced from 3 dice to 2 dice. In case of there are fines, the prosecutor gets half that money and half the influence. In case of death or exile, he gets half of all the popularity and half the total influence, both rounded down. In case of multiple commanders, the prosecutor gains them from each of them. Okay. Now, no matter what, there will be new cards. Here's how the people deck happens. So you draw 7 cards from the people deck, form a mini deck. When drawing people cards, if there are not enough left to draw the required amount, leave the discards where they are and shuffle the cards of the next turn to form the deck. If there are no next deck, blah, blah, blah. Players take turns picking up the mini deck, choosing 1 card, and passing the rest to the next player. The player order will be fewest to most victory points plus influence cubes. Black cubes count as negative victory points. Influence cubes. That's the green cubes. And we will have a track of this. So it's actually influence cubes only? Yeah, interesting. So he will have a total of 2 at this point. And we are going to need additional markers for all these others. And like I said, counters would work so much better here. Obviously, I don't have to have all those markers on the board at the same time. I will just clear them off because they're really obnoxious all piled up like that. But eventually, they'll all be on there, but they probably won't all be clustered on one number like they are at the beginning of the game. Okay, let's try not to breathe. Resolve ties in favor of whoever has the least votes, whoever has the older statesman. And you discard any cards no one drafts into the discard pile, which means they're available to be pulled out. Remember, there was a mechanism to pull cards out of the discard pile. Pay money. You cannot draft a statesman outside your own class. You can't draft income cards even if they can only be played outside your class. If your choices are all statesmen outside your class, draw replacement cards until you get one that's not that, and then you keep this, and all the others go back on top of the deck. You can only hold 5 people cards at a time. If you have more than 5, you must play or discard to reach 5. Okay. Now we come to some of the political rules. We've had a few already within, hints of them from the laws. But under an oligarchy, there is a coup phase at the end of the turn. A player can declare a coup to set up their statesman as the tyrant, changing the government to tyranny. Resolve a coup via a multi-turn minigame when the government type is oligarchy. And this is, completely different. But it is maybe the analogy of the revolts that happened against Rome, but different. In this phase, any player other than the one controlling the Archon and having at least one troops card, either in hand or assigned, can declare a coup. The declaration declares one of their statesmen, the declarer. Only one player can declare a coup each turn. Temporarily clear the cards from the upper 12 board boxes. I don't know. I guess that's these. I'm counting too many. Something seems funny here. So this is the news deck. News 1. I see there's a line from the board where the board joins that I'm counting. Okay. So what do we have here? So the coup is going to be played up there on that board. Then place one of the declarer's troops cards on the news 5 box and up to 2 more troop cards in any vacant corner boxes, including the news deck and the discards, I guess. Including the news deck, news 3. Status. Oh. So yeah, these boxes also get cleared. Okay. I was looking at it, or the box just above active projects. Great. The empty box that means nothing other than here. All these troops cards can come from their statesman or from hand. Statesmen, so anyone in the thing. Place coup troop markers. Those are on the reverse of some of the time track markers. Says fleet costs doubled. There's some informational stuff there, and unfortunately, if you pick them all in order, you kind of eat up all the tokens of the right type. But we might use other tokens for this. Or green cubes on top of each of these cards to indicate they support the coup. Then the government gets to deploy, starting with the player to the declarer's left. Each in turn can place a troops card from hand or from a statesman in a vacant corner until no vacancies remain. Each places a cube of their color on their own cards. Anytime a player deploys a troops card, if they have a statesman with military ability of 3 or higher, they can deploy the statesman in the battle by placing their player figure on the troops card. Place a coup marker on that statesman. Now, I hope there aren't too many leaders with ranking of 5 or 3 or higher. So, for example, here he's got 2. He's only got 1 player marker. It is conceivable that he might be able to put 2, but the rules don't seem to support that, so I don't know. In each coup turn, the declarer first moves any of their cards, and after all their moves, attacks with them. Then each other player performs a move and attack sequence of their own in clockwise order. Declarer troops attack other players attack only the declarer. During your turn, you can move each of your troop cards 1 box, orthogonally into a vacant box. Troops can attack into the News 4 box only from the News 5 box. Now, if you remember, News 5 was the special box, wasn't it? That the declarer is able to go into? Yeah. Okay. And that's going to be like the hill. Okay. When a troop ends adjacent to an opposing one, it can attack one orthogonally adjacent card by making a die roll. If both the troop strengths are the same, this is a 4 through 6. The modifiers: the attacker's larger, it's +1. The attacker's smaller, -1. If the attacker has a player figure, it's +1. If the defender is in the News 4 box, the attack only works on a 5 or 6, ignoring modifiers. Okay. Ignoring modifiers. Interesting. So a smaller attacker can get in there without an additional penalty. Taking hits and retreats. When attack succeeds, place a clear cube on the target and make a die roll. If the die roll is less than or equal to 2 times the number of clear cubes, the troops disintegrate. The card's discarded. The attacker can immediately move into the vacated box. If the roll was a natural 1, you remove a clear cube from the attacking card. I guess they recruit from the defeated. Commander casualties. If your figure is on a troop's card, when it disintegrates, roll a die on a 4 through 6. The statesman dies. Otherwise, put him on another own troop card. Yeah, I think you can only have 1 statesman involved in the coup, or return the figure to the statesman card. Additional troops. During the coup turn, just before you move any troops, you can add troops to a vacant corner box. The just added card can't move, but it can attack if it's adjacent. If one side has no troops left on the board, the coup ends in a victory for the other side. If no government troops have attacked coup troops for 3 turns, the coup ends. At that time, if the coup player occupies the News 4 box, the coup succeeds, otherwise it fails. So this actually kind of reminds me a little bit of Junta in terms of how this sounds like it's going to play out, rather than Republic of Rome, where the player becomes kind of a war. This instead becomes sort of a battle for control of Athens itself. I like that. And again, it's a different situation. It's not like Republic of Rome did it wrong for it, and this is doing it right, or vice versa. It's just, with a different situation, a different take seems appropriate. Okay, after the coup, you take back any surviving troop cards, remove any clear cubes, and assign them to your statesman, however you like. You can then discard troop cards at the end of any trade phase. Return to the board all the cards that you removed, all the state info that is sitting out there. If the coup failed, you roll a die. On a 6, the declaring statesman dies. Otherwise, he goes into exile for 2 spaces, and the government type remains oligarchy. If it succeeds, you roll a die. On a 6, the archon dies. Otherwise, he goes into exile for 5 spaces. If the owning player has not won the game, the government type becomes tyranny, and the declarer becomes the tyrant. Okay. Transitions from government types. When the form of government, this may explain the cards. I just didn't read through this because it's in a box. I need a drink to avoid even the minimal processing, but whatever. Okay. When the form of government changes, no one can play laws corresponding to the forms other than the current one, but players can continue to draft and hold such cards. Democracy to oligarchy. Democracy transitions to oligarchy via the 30 Tyrants intrigue card. If more than one player tries to play this at the same time, I assume there's more than one copy of it, you roll dice to see who gets it. This must happen after the unsuccessful prosecution of a war. So you do the following steps. Determine the war results. Finish resolving any other wars. Athens is prosecuted. If the leader did not die in the war, he dies now. Omit the determined public reaction phase. All office holders. I don't know what the leader is. I think that's the statesman in charge, not the military leader. But I'm not. I think the military leader is a commander. Yeah. All other office holders lose their office. The player of the card designates an aristocratic statesman who becomes the new leader, the archon. Now, this is important. If you're one of the aristocrats, you want this. If you're not, you don't. One other player can make an immediate assassination attempt on the archon. If successful, the game continues as if 30 tyrants had never been played. State revenue is dropped to 25 talents. Tribute to the conquerors, which seems a little weird. Like, if they lose anyway, don't they get it? Athens loses the Delian League status, the Delian League dues law, and the revenue that goes with each. Following laws, a set of laws gets removed into the discards. The oligarchy deck cards get shuffled into the people deck. Ignore any loss to a perilous war. Remove all wars of the type whose defeat enabled play of the 30 tyrants, either Persian or Spartan, and save them to the side. If they're Persian, you ignore the King of Kings takes notice when it appears and draw a replacement. Persian hostility is not in effect. Available offices are the Archon, Basilius, and Polemarch. Only the aristocrats can have them, and the 4 strategos, who are open to all. You elect these office holders as part of 2 voted proposals. The first is the first 3 offices. The second is all the strategos. The Polemarch and strategos can lead forces in war. Should the archon die, the Basilius and the Polemarch automatically succeed him. Should both also die, the aristocrat in Athens with the most influence becomes the new archon. If there's no such aristocrat, the government type reverts to democracy. Now, what's not clear here is when they become archon. When you become an archon, you gain certain advantages. I think you gain them even if you become archon illicitly. But I'm not positive. Assembly and voting. Only aristocrats can vote. This does not include their followers. Only aristocrats can play ecclesia cards. A statesman whose card indicates aristocrats is one. Those that do not, regardless of their faction. So it's possible for players to acquire characters who are not from their class. That's what I thought, but I also thought that I might have seen a prohibition against it and just couldn't find it yet. There's no ostracism. If Athens incurs Persian hostility, place any previously saved Persian wars in imminent. You can repeal plague laws that indicate the possibility by making and passing a proposal to that effect. I guess that's not possible outside of this. Only aristocrats and their followers vote in trials. These cards do not participate. Anyone can prosecute. Democratic resistance. The players can attempt to nip oligarchy in the bud via the play of a Democrats Resist Intrigue card. Players declare in order starting left of the Archon whether they support the Democrats or the oligarchic government. The Archon's faction is automatically with the government. The player of the Democrat Resists is with the Democrats. There are rebel counters on the back of some time trackers for the resisting statesman. Any exile returns immediately to his faction, even if ostracized. The player of the card indicates any statesman on the Democrat side to general its forces and assigns him the leading statesman office. Each player chooses a unique number from 1 to 6, assign any remaining numbers equally between the 2 sides. If there are an odd number of these, give the extra one to the Democrats. So each player gets a number, and there's some extra numbers possible, but we're going to have 6 numbers for each of the players. Roll a die for each active army. If you get the number of a player in the government, the army stays on the board. If it's a Democrat player or an unassigned number, that army goes with the leader. It's an unassigned number. During the resistance, there's recruiting. In subsequent turns, the government recruits any armies. Roll for each of these and place them in the same way. They might not end up with the government. So, if no players support the oligarchy, it might not survive. Add 3 clear cubes to the active forces. These represent garrison armies from the nation that conquered Athens. When in combat, Athens loses these armies first. No one can rebuild them. I am assuming, since it says government garrison, that they support the government. Army maintenance, the government pays maintenance for its fleets and armies. The Democrats do not pay for theirs. The government garrison doesn't need maintenance. The Democratic players are outside Athens. They still take turns, collect income, bid for extra initiatives, and draft people card, but they only have certain turn actions listed here. We're going to have to worry about looking up what can they do, what can't they do. I'm not really sure. Let me see if I have. There we go. So you can't persuade. They reveal the news card. They don't get any of the interfaction relationships. They can play a statesman or attract a follower. And it looks to me like they can't do an event, but otherwise they can do action, pretty much all the actions. So it's just the interpersonal stuff they can't do. Okay. During the next turn, the government treats the Democrats and the leader as an act of war, having the strength of their armies plus the leader's military ability. This war continues until the government garners either victory or defeat or fails to prosecute it. The latter would be a government defeat. After each combat, the Democrats lose armies equal to 4 minus n, where n is the number of armies the government lost. After determining Democratic losses, check for command or death for the leader in the usual way. If the leader dies, the player of Democrats resist chooses a new leader from any statesman of the Democratic players. Oh, I need more. Resistance, leader, death. After determining, no coup. While the war is active, there's no coup attempts. Okay, well, when does the war end? I suppose only through the 3D roll here, and it's possible that you get a stalemate, not a standoff or disaster. At the conclusion of the war, all statesmen return to Athens. So this is more like a Republic of Rome style revolt. All Democratic armies return to the board, and you remove any remaining clear garrison armies from play. If the Democrats win, the government returns to democracy. The leader gets 2 influence and 2 double popularity chits. A new leader is appointed according to the rules on the leader card, which might be the same person, but can't be anyone from a side that chose to be with the government. But that'll change. The Archon goes on trial without need of an ecclesia card. The leader chooses the prosecutor, who is not himself. Not the same statesman or not the same player. Not sure. Other government office holders all resign. Remove from play and replace any oligarchy cards you draw from the people deck. Players can hold on to ones that they have, however, if they wish. If the government win, the leader dies and the oligarchy continues. Oligarchy becomes a tyranny via coup. Without an expansion that supports tyranny, if you get a coup, you win. Damn it. Victory condition. The game ends the first time any of the following occurs. Normal ending. At the end of the turn in which you exhaust the scenario's news cards. Okay. Via successful coup under an oligarchy. Via faction depletion roll. I don't know that one. I don't remember that. Failure. These conditions, bankruptcy, if the state goes bankrupt, if there are 4 more active wars at the end of the current phase. This sounds like a combat phase. This sounds like Republic of Rome's type things. Lost to a perilous war. If they take a defeat or disaster to a perilous war and no one plays 30 tyrants, the game is over. And remember, 30 tyrants turns you into an oligarchy. Unprosecuted perilous war. If there's 1 or more active perilous wars and Athens fails to prosecute both the land and sea portions of the lowest number 1 and no one plays 30 tyrants. Peloponnesian War is number 0, I don't know, for the lowest number. If the game ended via coup, the player who declared the coup wins outright. Otherwise, when the game ends, players add their popularity totals to their victory point totals. If the game ended in failure, each player deducts the current votes and talents from their victory points. The player with the most victory points wins. Now, you read through this, and there's some more here, and you say, this doesn't really feel like the whole game's here. And it's not. Some of it's in here. First things first, obviously, the setup for the scenarios, etc. is in here. And some of that kind of interacts with what's in there a little too much. But then, there's types of cards that are active Zeus, and they have specific rules. They will be removed from play in general. Okay, and we're talking about the Archon allies. Yeah, we don't know about them. Forces sent to war can include 1 or more allies. These counters are ever available apart from their own restrictions, provided Athens sends at least 10 armies in case of a land war and 10 fleets in case of a sea war. Each ally can accompany an Athenian force at most once per turn. If Athens employs Spartan and other allies, any active Spartan leader adds his value. That could be an active foreign leader. And in the case of a land battle, is the overall commander, contravening the usual rule. Okay, well, what we don't know is what the army counters are, if there are any for this. This appears to be, okay, so this is like 20 fleets and 30 armies just added for the Persian Wars. And this is additional armies. So this is not the Thetes, which seem to be related to the cards, nor the other thing, which I don't know yet. Basilius, I'm just trying to see if... Okay, each statesman has their own class, nobody there. Death. Okay, so this is an important thing. What happens when you die? That's covered here, not in the rolls. His popularity turns to victory points for the owning player on a 1-for-1 basis. Popularity, not influence. Okay. If victory points end up negative, it tells you how to handle it. When the faction leader dies, the oldest statesman in the faction becomes the faction leader immediately. The time trackers, talents, and office all go into supply. Income and troops cards are discarded, which means they can be pulled back, remember. His statesman is removed from play. Any tribe marker goes where it belongs, as discussed earlier. A player who loses their last statesman here's the depletion roll. Ah, interesting. Which was in here. You have to read this first to understand that rule book, and that's what confused the hell out of me. I thought I'd read the rule book and then go to the scenarios, and no. You actually need this first, or you need to be able to refer back and forth, and there is no link between them anywhere. Nowhere where it says to read one before the other, no indexing into here from specific roles, none of that, which hurts me. A player who loses their last statesman in Athens plays the first playable statesman immediately found via the following methods. Basically, they're going to be pillaging through the discards and their own cards if they don't have one in hand. If there's nothing available, and that includes other players' hands, then the game ends. Rules for what DR means. How exile works. When a statesman goes in exile, his popularity is added to the player's score. Return office cubes money and counters to the supply. It sounds like he's almost dead. Unless he's ostracized. Flip the statesman card over. He doesn't participate in play in any way except for Hand of Time or if he's recalled from exile. Yeah, so he's semi-dead. However, if he's not exiled permanently, but for an amount of time, you use time trackers. What it doesn't say is whether you remove all these other things, and do all these other steps. I don't know. Maybe you go through them all and he's automatically recalled. When the exile marker but that's kind of painful because his votes and income cards and everything all go away, which isn't unreasonable. It's just, it's more painful. It is like he died and comes back to life. When the exile marker becomes the earliest or tied for earliest on the track, he returns to Athens, rejoining his faction. If the exile marker is after the statesman's regular time marker, unless he's recalled, he's going to die before he comes back. I'm going to have to swap batteries. It's fine that I took a break, I guess. Through this glossary because there's, important rules hidden in here, basically. Force pool is what's available to Athens when Athens loses or disbands and returns the pool. Law cards are kept secret and played as permitted during the assembly phase. You play them, they remain in the status phase. Then leader is the leading is the archon or the leading statesman. Okay, cards that represent challenges. The backs of some cards offer an alternative points tracking system. Put this for every 10 victory points. Okay, so yeah, as these come out, people can score their victory points on them or something. Okay. In case you don't want to share the track there or something. Ostracism. This is a law. You trigger ostracism by playing Ecclesia Intrigue card during the assembly phase, provided that, and again, I doubt this is on the card to refer you to here. So if the rules aren't all on the card and they don't look like they'd fit, again, a design issue. Maybe if it says C. Provided the leader and one other have at least one popularity. Athens can conduct at least most one ostracism per turn. Ostracism affects the leader and the statesman having the most popularity markers. Doubled markers count as 2. If ties, remove one popularity marker from each participant at random and reveal the remaining markers. The one with the lowest total goes into exile. But unlike usual exile, the funds on his card go to his faction treasury. His followers, to whoever is now the faction leader, lose only a die roll worth of influence, and the exile lasts only 3 spaces. So you can just kind of say, I don't like this person. If the leader was a strategos, the leader can propose a replacement, or if the statesman was. Persian hostility. Okay, Persian hostility can happen from this, and there's a special card to handle that. Again, unexplained in the rules, only in here. Popularity. You get these markers, you draw them at random, you put them face down on the card, you can't examine them. If the supply ends up insufficient, you take markers from of the other type until they can satisfy, if they can satisfy. So if you're able to take 2 single markers and none's available, you can take a double instead. If you take a double and none is available, take 2 singles instead. But if this still is not sufficient, award the remaining markers in age order, oldest first. To satisfy any remaining demand, the receiving players steal one at a time the required number of markers at random from the statesman having the most markers, if they have the required type. If not, continue to the one having the second most, and so on. Pretty dicky and weird. Like, you don't get to score them. When losing markers, draw them at random and mix into the pile face down. If you fall short of the specified number of markers to lose, take black negative popularity cubes on a one-for-one basis instead. If you run out of these, place a time tracking marker showing the correct number and a black cube on top of it. Monuments and structures, these are the projects. Again, not explained in the rules, only over here. And I mean, you could say this is part of the rules, but man, it's not that they're in separate books, it's that those books kind of don't reference each other in any way, and so there's no expectation. And you feel like, wait, where was the game, man? This looked just like a glossary. What the hell? Yeah, there's stuff in here. Okay. So you end up putting a time tracker, a number of turns ahead to indicate how far it goes. There's popularity gained by it. We've actually explained most of what happens from it. Spartan leaders replace any previous Spartan leader, and when using the Spartan ally, they come in effect. If you're fighting the Spartan war, they come in effect on the other side. I think we've already talked about statesmen and their values. And I think that's actually most everything. Ties. When there are ties in the game, you basically randomize. Here we keep going. Yeah, we've taken a look at the war cards already. Yeah, so that's about it. They have some player notes. For example, you really want to get the Persian Wars out of the way, kind of like the Punic Wars in Republic of Rome. The difference here is, did I find victory? And I've already gone into this. Victory condition, the game ends anytime the following happens. If the game ends in a coup, the person who wins the coup is successful. Otherwise, no matter how it ends, it's your popularity, your current popularity added to your victory point totals. Just your popularity cubes, or markers. That sucks. So actually, victory points plus influence is not important. That's not a way. Oh, it's not important towards victory. It is important for certain aspects where maybe you do need to track it. I don't know that you need to keep it constantly in track, though. Okay. So the fact that it doesn't have that co-op element does really worry me. One of the things that keeps Republic of Rome working is that anybody who has... So, it does create philosophical problems, though. But the way I view it, everybody has sort of a stake in keeping Rome alive. The only question is whether or not it's better to have Rome fall sort of to the coup type situation, have an emperor installed, or the dictator for life or whatever, or whether some other means of winning is as egregious a problem. So I could see someone taking kind of the Brutus type view. I would rather that Rome falls than, Caesar takes over or whatever. I can see that kind of stance in that game. And this is the thing. Everybody's got their own individual, maybe, take on what the victory conditions actually mean. And that kind of intrigues me, but I can see where that frustrates the shit out of people as well. And, it certainly, I see the clashes and I'm intrigued by them where, I look at it and say, well, you're actually willing to let Rome fall to Carthage rather than, see me get an influence of 21 in Rome, which is sort of a lesser victory than like the military takeover. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm just that great and that important that, I'm seen as the greatest thing since sliced cheese or whatever. And that's so that kind of disturbs me in some ways. But what disturbs me the most is if you're getting towards the end of the game of Republic of Rome, and somebody starts saying, I can't win. I'm pretty sure I'm out of it. Even if nobody wins an automatic victory, if we make it to the end of the deck, there's going to be, this victory point total test. And then they view the fall of Rome as, well, at least nobody beat me, and therefore I did better than if I came in, say, third. Like, that really disturbs my viewpoint of it. So, I can understand it's, in this case, unless you can win by causing the fall, you don't want that to happen. What doesn't bother me as much is, again, the Alcibiades example. There is the possibility of, I don't know about a whole faction of the kind of prominence that the factions here have, but certainly of a statesman or maybe a pair of people turning traitor to all of Athens. And we'll see how big these factions get. If they don't get much bigger than they are, if they stay at 3 or 4 characters each, I'm not too bothered. If they start building up to the size that Republic of Rome factions get to, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I accept it. Okay. Because there you're talking about massive treason, on the scale that we seem to have in our government today. All right. Let's send this up.